And I suppose that's because part of the service that we offer is to take the pain away from the process. As you said, it's an annoying process. It can be quite time intensive, and to get it wrong is quite a big setback. So I guess what we do is provide a more specialist approach to that.
The whole recruitment thing is just irritating. I got to a point where I just want to come to work and leave my brain at the front door and pick it up when I leave.
There's a lot of upfront work, and you imagine how many people we do that work who then ring and say, oh, I got a permanent job, and we're genuinely pleased for them. But I think a lot of people think, recruiters just, send out CVs. I know it's bad when I start dreaming about it. I was going to say, I feel like you've opened Pandora's box there.
Why do you think the market is in such a state at the moment? What's wrong? Like, what has gone wrong?
I mean, it's hard to say about in terms of a scale of like what was needed or what was excessive.
Thoughts on that. But to begin with, I wanted to delve into that NZ market. Why do you think the market is in such a state at the moment? What's wrong? Like, what has gone wrong for it to be in such a, how can I put it? I see it more of a congested, constricted state at the moment. It seems there's so many jobs, but yet people are still struggling to find employment. There's like 80 applications. I remember I was looking after one role in work and it was like 85 applications for one role. And this is quite common.
Mm-hmm.
And also it's people I've realized who are quite highly skilled and highly experienced applying for jobs that you would think they can do this with their eyes closed. They seem over qualified, but yet still there's so many people looking to shift jobs. So what has caused all of this, or what's the issue? What do you think? What are your thoughts been? I know it's a loaded question.
I was going to say, I feel like you've opened Pandora's box there. There's a lot of different things that I feel like there's different parts to that question. So I think it's almost sounds a bit cliche, but kind of like the perfect storm of quite a lot of different factors that are feeding into it. So I guess the first thing is that it's like any market changes, it's a pendulum. It was always going to swing back this way. Historically, I mean, it's probably as long as 2 years ago now, we were in that stage where finding good applicants for a role was really tough. And there was a lot of competition to get good candidates. You had to move really fast. You had to have a really good offer. They were able to be really selective and actually, to be honest, quite demanding. So, and I mean that nicely, but they had the pick. So salaries were high. They were bumping up hugely. And even at the time, I remember having conversations about how sustainable that was for businesses. But they had to do what they had to do to get the right person on board and be competitive. So that was what we were getting used to. And then obviously with the way the economy shifted and businesses have had to reassess their costs, I have to imagine those higher salaries that were negotiated at that time have played into that. Expectations were really high. So it's been tough, I think, for people potentially who have found themselves in a disestablished role or restructuring situation to then go back to the market. Again, like anything else, housing, anything that you look at, the average cost or average salaries has shifted a wee bit. So that's tough. And obviously we all know that the economy is the way that it is. Unfortunately, there's loads of businesses that are having to restructure, meaning that there's more people looking for work. The government sector, we all know that's had a lot to do with it as well. There's been a lot of people that have either found themselves having to leave or have chosen to leave because the uncertainty is too much. Yeah, it's tricky. You mentioned the 80 applicants. I mean, we're saying we've had roles where we've had over 300. And I know that's not the
For
highest
one job.
I've heard. Yeah. Yeah. So,
Wow.
yeah. So, I mean, we're talking, I said about the market where the candidate really had the leverage. It's gone back the other way, and employers really have the pick at the moment. So, yeah, it is a very, very tough market at the moment. And you're right about the really skilled people looking for looking at opportunities that realistically they could do very, very easily, and finding that they're unsuccessful with that. So what I'm finding is I'm having a lot of conversations with people where I'm trying to explain to them that from an employer's perspective, yes, they would be getting a whole lot of added value by someone who is well overqualified for the role, but they're also looking for longevity. So it's a bit of a risk as an employer, isn't it, to hire somebody who you know could go and achieve a much higher income and be in a position where they're progressing their career, and another opportunity as soon as the wind changes. I mean, that assumes a lot about what that person wants, but it's a risk for that hiring manager as well.
Yeah, that's one thing I found with some of the applications that I was looking at. I was quite surprised of the level of candidate that applied for the role because
Mhm.
of, it's not to diminish any role because all jobs are important and we know that. But the thing is that just the level these people have worked at, like I had some people who had worked for government, central government,
Yeah.
applying for the roles. And I was just thinking to myself that, yeah, it does put you off as an employer because you think, well, actually,
Mhm.
I don't know how long that person will stay if they get another opportunity in a different area that will pay more than what we could pay, and they'll be gone. And then you're having to go through the whole recruitment thing again. And the whole recruitment thing is just irritating. It takes so long. It's tiring.
Yeah.
As you would know, in your role. But I was just so surprised at the amount of applicants and the experiences that they have had applying for all of these roles, which was really, yeah, surprising,
Mm.
especially in the government sector as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that's come from? Sorry, go on.
I was going to say, I think I, I have had conversations with people who have come from roles where they've been under a lot of pressure, and I mean, I don't want to keep talking about the COVID thing because it feels like it's a distant memory now. But we are still seeing it's still relevant to the conversation here and there. So I think post COVID organisations went through a lot of change, and they went through often quite a lot of boom. There was a lot going on, temporarily, albeit, and people were worried about their positions. So people stayed through roles where historically maybe they would have resigned and started looking for something else. So people hung on to opportunities, and I've seen a lot of people who have carried the torch through the tough times for an organisation at that higher level and really burnt themselves out. So it's not. I think that in some cases they genuinely are looking for a slight step back, because they've actually gone, you know what, I'm ready to come to work, give 100%, go home again, and that be the end of my day, which I think is a perfectly reasonable way to want to live. So yeah, I think there are some cases where people are genuinely wanting to move in the opposite direction to what we would consider the next step for them. Not everyone is after progression, but you're right. You're absolutely right. As an employer, it's a risky thing, and when you've got 100 applicants, you
Yeah,
have the opportunity to be quite choosy.
yeah, 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 100%. I think one thing I remember this was yonks ago, but I remember when I was working in like a supermarket, and there was a guy who applied for the role. It was just stacking shelves in like a supermarket, just like a new world. And I got talking to him, and he used to be like a top CEO of this company. And I was just like, what is this guy like doing here? He didn't lose his job, And this was the other thing I was thinking of with these applicants, about these people who are highly skilled. And I asked him, why did you apply for this job when you're doing this? Because he said, I got to a point where I just want to come to work and leave my brain at the front door and pick it up when I leave.
Yeah.
And it's funny, but you think about some of these people, are they just wanting to do a job that they can do with their eyes closed, and they'll just leave their brain at the front door and then pick it up when they leave? It's that job security and comfortability and the ease of not having to stretch their brain in that way, which was what was the hindrance when you look at some of these applications, really.
Yeah. And when someone's been in a leadership role like that before, you know, a high management role, potentially they have neglected other parts of their life. You know, and that's an assumption, but it's not an uncommon one. So it could be that they've recognized actually they want to put that energy and soul that they have into outside work, but they prefer the routine or the income of some sort from a paid job. So yeah, it's certainly not an uncommon thing to be told through the interview process, that's for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, with you, I think it's pretty obvious that you work within the sphere of employment. So what is it that you do?
What is it that I do? So the official word is obviously as a recruitment specialist. I work with employers, businesses locally who would like to either have us manage their permanent recruitment process or have short-term need, and I can support them with temporary stuff as well. But what that really means is that when, as you said, it's an annoying process, it can be quite time intensive, and to get it wrong is quite a big setback. So I guess what we do is provide a more specialist approach to that, to try and alleviate as much of the pain as possible. Yeah. So we do everything. I do it's I believe uncommon, although I say that having only worked for one recruitment company. We do something called a dual desk. So rather than focus on just permanent recruitment or just temporary solutions, we do a bit of both. So that's quite fun actually, because it means that you get to do the slower burn, the deeper sort of understanding of roles, more in-depth interview process, and then equally have some fast-paced, quick solutions, which is good to fill the day. So yeah, it's an interesting one, and we have our own set of clients that we look after. Obviously, there's an aspect of business development with that all the time. Yeah, but it's a
So
juggle.
how long have you been in recruitment for?
So just on 4 years. Yeah.
And what was it that drew you to that area of work? Like, what was it? What was it about recruitment that you thought, yeah, that's something I definitely want to take a punt on and go for?
Well, interestingly, I thought what is quite a unique story actually isn't a unique story at all. I understand this is quite common in the industry. So I got into recruitment by accident. So I had been through a situation where a role I had taken on wasn't quite what it was proposed to be, at least what I was
That's
hoping
very
it would be.
common as well.
Also not uncommon. And I thought, look, I'm going to go and register with a temp agency and just kind of get some work to tide me over while I either work this into being what I'm hoping it's going to be and or think about another option. And it just so happened that someone had recommended my current employer as the place to go. And I managed to fluke speaking to the right person on the phone who doesn't usually answer the phone. So all the stars were aligned that day. And I just went in and had a general, what I thought was a registration chat interview to register for temp work. And the conversation sort of evolved into, have you considered working in recruitment, which I had never. But because my background was sales, it's similar in its relationships, its coordination. Yeah. Yeah, so that was what drew me to it originally, and as soon as it was sort of put in front of me, it just seemed like a really obvious, fun place to be, actually. Yeah.
Did you have any like preconceived thoughts or ideas about what recruitment is before you jumped into it?
No, I'm embarrassed, although probably not alone. I didn't really have much thoughts about recruitment at all. I'd never been in an organisation that had utilised a recruitment agency. Being in a sales kind of background, I had always predominantly worked remotely for Auckland-based companies where my territory was my territory. So I was either on the road or at home, and my contact with the team was, phone, email, and Teams. So I hadn't had personal experience where I'd seen that as a solution, and I wouldn't have known. It wasn't something that was really even front of mind for me as an option. It wasn't until someone else had said to me, "Have you thought about registering for temporary work?" And no, I didn't really have any preconceived ideas. I guess I thought of it as quite a corporate world. I would have likened it to, real estate agents, like that kind of polished, shiny, glamorous space. And I remember that being a little bit daunting because that's not really me as a person. But yeah, no real preconceived ideas, just that I was sort of embarrassed to kind of go, oh, I never would have thought of this. But as I have conversations with people as I go along, I think that seems to be a common thing, particularly for people who haven't considered if they should just do temp work. And I kind of wish I'd known that was something that was an option when I was younger, to try a few more things out. You're so desperate to get a job and earn income when you're younger that you often fall into jobs that kind of sweep you up and take you along for the ride. And it's not until a few years later that you're wondering how you got to this point and what you really want to do. Yeah. So
True.
Yeah, the temp thing is a cool way of figuring that out, I guess. Yeah.
So when you started your career in recruitment, was there anything that shocked you in the beginning stages that were quite a surprise or seemed overwhelming in that area?
It's funny, it feels like quite a long way to go back into the archives, actually.
What, the mental archives?
Yeah. 4 years feels like a long way to go back and how I used to feel. That shocked me.
Or anything you were surprised with?
Yeah. I think there was a few things that I had to come to grips with. One thing I often say about recruitment, and it's still true now, but when you're new to it, it takes a little bit to get the hang of, is finding the line between being as open-minded and non-judgmental and having no bias and all that sort of stuff, because we all have natural unconscious bias. So that was something that we talked a lot about and that I worked really hard on to begin with, to be just as conscious of as possible, because you want to ensure that you are being as fair through that process, because you're given an opportunity and you've got people's livelihoods in that stack of CVs. So you don't want to be having any kind of unreasonable or unfair assumptions about people. But at the same time, it's your job to go through that list and find the best person. So by nature, it's a judge kind of role, because you are comparing person to CV to CV. So it's a hard line to walk, to be completely fair, and yet still remove options so that you get down to that one person. Yeah. So that was surprising. Yeah.
But yeah, that I see that more as you lot just exercising the right judgment to place the right person who is the right fit with that company or business or organization or whatever, isn't it? And
yeah,
I think that's different than judging, having preconceived ideas or judging an applicant or Yeah.
100%. I suppose the grey area is when you're not aware that you have those biases that are unconscious. Yeah. So it's a tricky one. And I mean, the only thing you can do is work really hard on being self-aware
Yeah.
and check that every time you're thinking, actually, no, I don't think this person is right, challenging your own opinion. And if you've got a quantifiable why. Yeah. Yeah.
So you said you've been 4 years in.
Yeah.
In general, how has it been?
There's a big sigh there. It's been really good.
That's a tired side, a sigh.
Yeah, it is a tired sigh. Yeah, probably the wrong week to ask me that question. No, it's been good. It's the kind of role where you are always on. So I love that. And in equal parts, I find it tiring. So it's suited to somebody who enjoys people. And I think I'm probably right on that cusp as an individual of it fills my cup, but it also drains it. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just laughing at the people part because it's a struggle working with people, isn't it? Like,
Yeah.
and yeah, I realized in the job like what you do and some other jobs, even in like sales type job as well, there's an element of you have to like people to a certain extent, or
Yeah.
I would say tolerate.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah. It's you see all sorts, I suppose. You certainly have exposure to all kinds of humans. And I think the reason I'm probably sighing at the moment is because with the job market the way that it is, we're doing a lot more of the emotional conversation side of things. There's a lot of people that we're talking to who are frustrated and scared and disappointed, and feeling or receiving a lot of rejection because they're one of many applying for a job. So we're having a lot of almost more like consultative roles or conversations with job seekers than just clients at the moment. So yeah, it feels emotionally draining at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can understand because people would have had such vast experiences in the current job or employment market, and they come to you without being disrespectful, with baggage, right? They always come with baggage, right? And it's like you're the person who's going to fix the problem, but you're also the therapist to listen.
Yeah.
And then they want you to provide the solution and work everything and make it right again. So I'm assuming you work with both individuals and also businesses as well. So you work
Yes.
on both sides.
Yeah, we do. So it's always a balancing act between what's right for the organisation and what's right for the job seeker. Yeah, for some reason I feel like calling them candidates is impersonal, but then yet a job seeker is not hardly personalised. So individuals, yeah, we do. We work with both. So, and of course, as you're going through a process and you have had, in the hundreds of applications, there's a vast number of those that you've actually spoken to as well. It's not just that you receive them and you only speak to 2 or 3 people. You speak to quite a few. And sometimes it's a really quick, okay, cool, this isn't the right thing on either side, but all the people that you speak to, you have to then go back to with bad news apart from one. So, yeah, the volume thing, you do end up sort of having to, it's a lot of good news, a lot of really positive stuff, which is really the beautiful part of it is when you get to ring someone and say, hey, we're moving forward with paperwork, and that's the news that that they're really hanging out to hear. That's really cool. But yeah, at the moment there's a lot of support in addition. Yeah, which is fun. But
how much of a toll does that take on you all who work with individuals in that way, and you're calling up, as you mentioned, a number of them and saying, unfortunately, it hasn't worked this time, compared to ringing that one person? How much of a toll does that take on you? Because from what I've seen, you just want to place the person in a role that fits with them
Yeah.
and to get them into work. So
Mhm.
how much of a toll does that take on you guys when that happens quite often?
It's going to sound really heartless. For someone who's been doing it for a while, not a lot. You know, it's not that we don't care. It's just that you get to a point where it's a part of your day.
Just become numb. You come numb to that side, don't you?
You do, sort of. You get better at it with time. Initially that's the phone call that you don't want to make. And I guess I was lucky that I started at a time where it was hard to find great applicants. So I didn't have to make too many of those phone calls per role that I was working on initially. But I think you just get better as you go along. I've learned over time that people most often want to get off the phone to you as quick as possible. I think you and I spoke once about the value of giving feedback. And
Yes.
yeah, and how, some people really like feedback and how others don't. And I would say by and large, people who are receiving a phone call to say, hey, I'm really sorry, but we're not progressing, most of the time they can't wait to get off the phone. So I've learnt to say less because I'm a big talker. So I've learnt to not try and soften that blow. The more concise, the better. Obviously, as gently as possible. But initially, I would get into that loop of struggling to get the point across because I was trying to be too gentle. And I think it just prolongs people's discomfort. So unfortunately, you've got to sort of go right in with it. And yeah, and if as much as you can give feedback, what I don't find everyone wants it. So if I get asked for it, I'll give it to the best of my ability. But I don't usually give it unless someone asks, because I've had the opposite conversations before when someone says, "Oh, look," I've had to say, unfortunately, we're not moving ahead, and I've launched into that feedback, and you can tell that they just don't want to hear it. Not everyone wants to know the why.
Yeah, it's a difficult one, isn't it? I mean, I personally feel feedback is so important because it shows you where your blind spots are. But I understand people are in a situation where they just want to find work, and but actually the feedback is what could potentially help them to find work in terms of presentation, how they come across. Some people don't want to look at their shadow areas, do they? They just want to focus on, I just want a job. Do you have a set way of giving, like, when you call people up to tell them that, it's unfortunate, do you have a set way of doing it, or do you have to tweak it for every single person you have to tell that to? Because people, like you're saying, receive feedback or news differently. Some people just want it straight. Some people just, you have to go all the way around the houses before you get to the point. Like, do you have like a set way from your perspective that you just tell them?
I would say that I tweak it for everybody, but the recipe is still the same. So I've learnt the hard way that you don't give early on. I had a situation, for example, where, and I suppose this is the beauty, by the time I'm 4 years in, I'm certainly no expert, but I've done it long enough now that I've done some really awkward things. So I've learned some good stuff. So I've learned that that's not the moment to ask them how they went in the interview. If you're ringing up and you already know someone hasn't got the role, I remember this one time in particular, I had felt like I needed to get their feedback on the interview. So I'd said, "Oh, how did you go yesterday," or whatever. And they went, "Oh, really good. And I really loved it. And, I'm really, really hopeful." And then I had to say, "Well, I'm sorry you didn't get it." Like, how awkward is that? And I actually just felt like I'd been really cruel because I'd let them talk about it. And so that was an early on mistake for me. And I only did it once. So now
That must have been an awkward
yeah,
conversation.
it was awkward. It was. And I guess it makes me want to say, recruiters are human too. Sometimes we're uncomfortable, and sometimes we say things and then get off the phone and think, oh, that, you sort of expect whoever's handling a recruitment process to be infallible, and it's just the human element's always there. But obviously, as you go along, you get better. So yeah, it was really awkward, and I felt really bad. And so I don't put anyone in that position anymore. I don't let them kind of get too far into. Usually by that stage, I've already spoken to them and had their feedback in an earlier conversation. So I try and do that quite early now, before I actually know the result. So I get all of that feedback first and then say, cool, well, look, I'll follow up with you once I know more. Because, I mean, sometimes you get hey, thanks for the opportunity, but I didn't really enjoy that, or I don't think it's the right thing for me, which is good to know.
So they do give you feedback as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Super important.
Yeah. So yeah, I would say I tailor it for everybody, but by and large, I've learned that the simplest way is to be pleasant but clear and quick, and if they want feedback, be prepared to give it, which is hard.
Oh, I have no problem giving feedback. I'm telling
That
you.
doesn't surprise me.
And I honestly, I have no problem taking it. I don't know. I've always what I don't like is when people like to go all the way around the houses to give feedback. I can't. That makes me detest the person to a certain extent. I'm just like, do you know what? Just say it. Like, why are you wasting time? Going around. Oh, you thought you did this, and it's just like, what do you want to say? Just say it. And that's one thing I've had to learn here. Is to adjust that. It was actually my wife that was saying, sometimes you kind of need to just, be a bit more, take your time, be less forthright and direct, because not everyone sees things like that here, and I was just like, okay. Okay.
I was going to say, I feel like you're probably in the minority with both sides of that, well, not just both sides. You like the feedback, obviously, and you see the value in it. But as you said before, not everyone's able to, or in a position in that moment to want the mirror. Yeah. And I suppose the hard thing about that also is that at the moment, there's not actually necessarily a mirror to shine. Like, it's just that I had 20 people that could do the job. So we've had to go who interviewed the best, who felt like the right fit with the team. And you're always juggling that combination of you're working for your client is the employer, but you genuinely are a middle person trying to make it right for both people. So it's not like other industries where you work for who you get paid by, and that's it, regardless of what the other outcome is. Because obviously, if it's not a fit, that actually impacts us as well. So it's people's livelihoods. We're very honest with people, but balancing the employer's not confidentiality. Where I'm going with this is, say we have a client and they've got a difficult personality in their team, and they've said to us, hey, look, this person over here will only accept someone who's pretty quiet because they don't like loud people, and that person's too difficult for us to challenge that. So we just need a quiet person. Well, I can't say to candidates who are a little bit louder, hey, look, your personality, while there's nothing, excuse me, wrong with it, wouldn't fit with so-and-so because she's too, doesn't like people like this, because you have to respect that businesses, and they're speaking to you candidly. So you can't then regurgitate that information to the general public, especially not, in smaller towns, and be saying anything that could be construed as a negative against somebody. But then you have to word that feedback back to that person to sort of say, hey, look, it's actually nothing to do with you, but you wouldn't fit their team. You're basically saying there's something wrong with their team. So it's a hard one to find the right delivery and being honest without being too honest, because some stuff's not yours to say.
Yeah. That was one thing that I wanted to ask you, is that with your role in working for the business side and finding potential candidates for a business, part of that is not just finding the person who has the right skill, but also who fits in with the company's culture as well, isn't it? That's where I've seen massive recruitment fails, even in the place where I'm currently at, is just that the person, you can see how skilled they are, but they're just a problem. Like, they're just an absolute problem, because you can see they either rub people up the wrong way, or they're not communicative, and in the role they have to administer a high level of communication, and you can see it's not the right fit for the organization or the company as well. So that's quite a heavy load on your shoulders as well, is to match up the right person, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And I suppose you could actually argue it's more important than the skills, because if someone's got the aptitude and half the skills and is the right fit, they're probably going to be more valuable to that organization than someone who's got over the desirable skills and has no capability of fitting in with that team. So it is. And it's a hard one to quantify as well, because unless you're actually immersed in that business, you have to ask the right questions to even get a sense of what that culture is. So I guess that's one of the things that the recruitment as a service offers, is that oftentimes businesses won't even necessarily have actually looked at their own culture through that critical lens, won't even necessarily be thinking about it from that perspective, and or won't actually have the hiring manager may not have the true, I guess, temperature of that team, because they're only seeing it from that perspective. So it's a big one to try and get right. And my interpretation of something could be different to what my client's interpretation of something is as well. So one thing we quite often say, usually in a joking way, in a nice joking way, about when we've had an interesting character, we actually do say that there's always a role for somebody. And it is true, because I might meet someone and find them, I don't know, unanimated, for example, because I like people that I can read by their expression. So I'm naturally drawn to that because that's how I am. But it may be that the business I'm recruiting for has a fairly kind of dry team, and actually someone who's really animated would not only be uncomfortable, but would probably disturb that vibe, that equilibrium. So then you meet someone who's not really that way, and although they may not be my favorite person for a team or for my team, they're the right person for that team. So there is always a fit.
The fit's extremely important, isn't it? Yeah. You mentioned process before, and obviously because you work with individuals and also businesses, there's I guess two different processes involved in that. So could you just talk briefly about both? So what's the process like when an individual comes to you and is looking for, a would-be company or organization? And also, what's the process like for when the business wants to find an individual? How does that go about?
So for a individual, we're talking more of a general. They haven't applied for a specific job. So they've just come to us in general. Okay. So I guess the first thing is that there's a common, not misconception, but I get asked a lot about whether or not it costs that person anything to come to us.
Like a fee?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Which there isn't. So I do wonder if sometimes that puts people off from approaching agencies, because they're not sure if it's going to cost them money. So it doesn't. And the process, it used to be that you would walk in and you would give us your CV and you would approach us face to face. Like all things, that has moved to a lot more electronic. So you would register online, upload your information, and then usually that would then get allocated out to whichever recruiter either is working on a similar role or works on similar roles regularly. So it might be more of a specialty, or just in general, whoever is the most appropriate or available. And then within a couple of days, usually we would reach out to somebody and via phone and have a chat with them. If we don't have anything that is currently something that they might be able to look at and they're in a permanent employment already, we might just email them and just say that we haven't got anything, but here's some resources to use. But the phone call would be for someone who wasn't working or we thought might be a fit for something we are working on. And we'd just chat about some initial stuff to kind of get a gauge on where they are, what they're looking for, what their salary expectations are. And I'm waiting to see if you're going to ask me about that salary expectations question. Yeah, so we just ascertain some basic info and then decide from there where we go next, really. If they're looking to register for temporary work, then we would probably get them in. Usually we'd book them in to come and see us straight away. And if they're umming and ahhing, we might leave it with them to come back to us. But to register, you need to come and meet with us. I've got a cat meowing. And we just conduct an initial interview, really, which is more about discussions on what they've done before, what kind of skills they have, what they like, what they're looking for. And then we kind of upload that into our system so that when we have the opportunities come in, we use it as a bit of a matching and go from there. Because, of course, temporary stuff from the other side, when a client has a need for something, it's usually quite a quick turnaround. So we usually work with people that we've already registered. So you do all that work up front, waiting for those opportunities to come in. Yeah.
What about the businesses side?
Yeah. So they if they're coming to us for a temporary, what they would do is just basically reach out to whichever recruiter is their client manager or the business in general if they haven't worked with us before. And they'd give us the information on the kinds of skills that they're needing, approximate time frame, hours, all of that. But obviously, it becomes a mutually beneficial situation. So the more flexible either party can be, the more opportunity we have to match them up. So if a business says, look, we'd love full time, but we could probably make it work with school hours, then I've got options to give you either. So we do kind of go, okay, what's the best case scenario? What could still work? And where are we at? And then we explain to them from there kind of what the relevant hourly service fees would be for the rate that they've said is the rate for the role. Usually they base it on an internal or something like that. And then our role is to try and give them a couple of options based on people we already know to say, here's some CVs, this is who we think, what would you like to do next? And they usually dictate the process from there. Most of the time you do a meet and greet and decide who you think's the best fit moving forward. And if it's a permanent role, then they would come to us and we would go to make an appointment, really, and we would go and meet with them and discuss a whole lot of ins and outs about the role, which, as you can imagine, is quite an in-depth process and has been refined over a very long period of time. So we get some really good info, and then we handle the advertising, CV screening, phone call, initial phone screening, interviews, reference checking, and then shortlisting, and then organise, kind of liaise doing the organisation for the client interviews and offer negotiations and things like that. So they really only have to be present to do their own shortlisted interviews and have a contract ready.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I must say that when I worked with you with those two applicants, it was pretty straightforward. It seemed you might have obviously refined and changed it since then, because that was 2 odd years ago. But it seemed it was so easy. Didn't have a problem.
Yeah.
It was quite straightforward, which was very helpful for me, because it was just the HR. There was a period where I had to go through so much HR issues and recruitment, and you think almost every other month you're recruiting someone, and this is just ridiculous now. But I found the process from that perspective quite seamless, quite easy to manage, minimal, I would say, legwork from our side. And candidate she was great, fantastic. Really.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I mean, that's the whole point of it, right? Is to make it easy for hiring managers, employers, and excuse me, cat in the background. And then in that context, like that candidate, we would have already effectively recruited to our team to then be able to deploy her into temporary roles. There's a lot of upfront work, and you imagine how many people we do that with who then ring and say, oh, I got a permanent job, and we're genuinely pleased for them. But I think a lot of people think, oh, recruiters just, send out CVs, and you think, yeah, we actually invest a hell of a lot of time into getting those people to the point where we're really comfortable that what you've asked us for is what we're giving you. There's a lot of people that we do that process with that don't even end up in temporary roles because they've then sourced other opportunities, and that effectively is wasted time, but it's part of it. Yeah, it's part of it, and you're always pleased for them when they have gone and found something. So
yeah, that's one thing. I mean, that's one reason why I wanted to talk to you a lot deeper, because I have spoken to people before in the past, and there is this lack of understanding of what recruitment agencies and recruitment specialists actually do. They don't think they do a lot, and it's quite easy, quite straightforward. But when I've spoken to you on a few occasions, I started to think in my mind the depth of what your role entails, what it consists of, the back and forth, the meetings, just all of this stuff. And it led me to think, there's a huge amount of work involved that obviously the general public or the people who come to you don't see. They just get, in a sense, not really a product, but they get like a candidate or a person, so they don't actually see all the ins and outs. But when I've picked your brain before, I was like, man, this seems like a hell of a lot of background work that we just don't see or understand, really.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose that's because part of the service that we offer is to take the pain away from the process. So by and large, people, and that's from both sides of the table, I think that, and it almost counts against us, because people then go, oh, that was really fast, that was really easy. What are you actually doing? Why am I paying this fee? And yeah, it's a bit of a catch-22, because we talk about, you've probably heard this before, we talk about selling the iceberg and trying to explain just what goes into it. But the difficulty in that is that you just get on and do it, and it's your day-to-day role. You don't really spend too much time pondering, all that's gone into any one placement. You just get on and do it, and that's it. So it can be quite hard to then verbalize it in a step-by-step, so that someone else understands what you've actually been up to.
Yeah, no, 100%. Would you say you find your role challenging?
That's an interesting question. No, I don't think. I find it fast-paced, and I find the time management sometimes challenging, because it's a very reactive industry. So everything is urgent, and everything really should have been done yesterday. And I don't like feeling like I'm behind the 8 ball. I find that hard just as a personality fit. But no, I like it. I really enjoy it. I think that what I find when I have a challenge in the role, I actually like it. So I don't find it challenging as in a bad way, other than the always feeling like I'm scrambling.
What about from a growth perspective?
Yes, because I'm always learning things that I didn't know about business. So whether it's a particular industry that I'm recruiting a permanent role for that I have absolutely no idea about, which sounds terrible, but actually my expertise isn't actually in an industry or a job. My expertise is in people. So that's one thing you have to kind of get your head around when you start recruitment, is that it's not, particularly if you're generalist, meaning you do a bit of everything, as opposed to there's a lot of agencies that focus on one industry. So because I don't have an industry focus, you have a lot of imposter syndrome, because you're going and you're talking to people that are experts in their field about a role that they're saying, hey, can you do this? And can you do this better than I can do it, please? Well, that's hard. That feels like a hard thing to do. But actually you realize as you go along that it's not about knowing the role. Obviously there's stuff you need to know about the role, but it's actually more about understanding the wider picture, and you get better at that stuff all the way along. So yeah, so I learn about businesses, I learn about organizations, I learn about industries, I learn terminology that I otherwise wouldn't know much about.
Company jargon.
Yeah, but honestly, even things like governance, like I didn't have any idea about that before, because again, my roles had been sales. So I had the people side of things, I had the organization, coordination, management of myself thing, but I didn't have corporate at all. So, and learning about even, processes that are internal government agency and what's commonplace in that and things like that. So it's just worldly knowledge really as you go along. So I'm learning in that sense. Yeah. So yeah, challenging in a professional development way. No, but it's not boring either. It is. I do still feel like I am developing as a individual. Yeah.
It's probably a question that might be hard to answer based on what you said in terms of the way you fell into recruitment. But I was going to ask, has the job met your expectation? But having thought about that and then thought about how you said you've moved into it, there wasn't really an expectation, was there?
No, probably not a preconceived kind of idea of what it was going to be. But as I went along, I had expectations, I guess. Has it met them? Yeah. I think I would say yes, based on the expectations that I quickly established. Yes. Yep. I would say that it has. I would say that the best part of the role is when you meet somebody who you recognize as being just a real gem. And that's hard to quantify, but just has the right combination of attitude, personality, intention.
Are you talking about candidate? Someone who comes.
Yes, yeah. So, for example, very early on, I met a young person who I thought was really great, who had like zero professional experience, but just the way she carried herself and the way she spoke, clearly she was very intelligent, very unassuming, and I had an opportunity to get her a role that if she'd applied for that role, there's no way she would have made the shortlist. But I had an opportunity to put her in a position where someone was needed, and I was able to vouch for her, and she's really gone a long way in that organization. So that's the really cool stuff. And so I guess the reason I'm bringing that up is the expectation that I had was probably around having like meaningful impact on people. So I think if I think about those situations it has, I think as you go along, you do become a little bit, you lose that awareness of what it is to be a job seeker, I think, because you're just doing it so often. So it's quite good to stay grounded and remember that for people, it's a tough process. Job hunting isn't very fun, let's be honest.
No, it isn't, especially when you apply for so many jobs and you get knockback after knockback after knockback after knockback. So many people who I talk to, even myself, in a few occasions, you just think, what is the point? It just reaches a point where you're just, oh goodness, this is just long-winded. It's absolutely pointless, as well. But, depending on the individual, I like to look at experiences as lessons, and how can it then reshape your thinking to reposition yourself in a way of doing something different or doing something else. Like all of those knockbacks can make you think, well, actually, do you not think you should stop and think about what could you actually do yourself, like rather than constantly applying, for jobs, and just taking those experiences as, okay, what do I actually need to look at to change, to develop? What's the reason? Is it the market? Is it they're looking for a specific person? Or, I think we spoke about this once as well on the phone. Is it the fact that they already have someone in mind? Because I've seen that before, and legally you have to apply. You have to advertise, but they already have someone in mind, and it's just a foregone conclusion. Yeah, it's just really thinking about all of those things in general as well. But yeah, it's quite draining, and I have a lot of sympathy and understanding for a lot of people who are job seekers who get constant knockbacks. It's just frustrating, and that's what led me to think about, which is why I asked you that question in the beginning about the market, because it's every day I'm talking to someone who's it's pointless, had enough,
Yeah,
type of thing.
it is, and it's really tough. I mean, it's rejection. Ultimately, it's rejection, and it's difficult because it's human nature to feel that that's very personal, because it is. It's personal. It's your personal situation. So I said how I felt like I'm having a lot of almost like counselling conversations these days, and a lot of that is focused around trying to explain from an internal perspective just how many factors there are involved as to why you might be getting that thank you but no thank you. And you're saying about people reflecting and looking at why, and is there anything they can be doing differently, and 100% they should be. But it's also the mentality of it must be me, and it's not necessarily. It's a really hard one to walk that line of. And the reality is, so much of it depends on who's reading that CV. And there's no way to interpret the reader and their preference and, get that right. There is no way. So all you can really do is be authentic and trust that you will naturally find yourself in positions for people that are at least like to read a document the way you write it. Yeah, there's often a reason it doesn't work out, but it's tough.
Yeah, just quickly on that, because what you've just said actually re-invoked a thought, is often when CVs are read, I remember when I first went into management, before I went into senior management, I always remember my manager at the time. She would always say, when you read CVs for would-be applicants, she says, always look at the role rather than the previous incumbent who was in the role. Because sometimes, and I've seen this from experiences, that let's say so-and-so does a role and they do a role in a certain way, the employer would look at that and think that's the role, where actually, when you look at the description, that's how that person's done it. That's not the role. So they then put all of these standards within the role, and then you just like, well, actually, that's not the role. And I learned quite early on from my manager at the time saying, look at the role, go back to the description properly and understand the role rather than looking at a person who previously done it. Because some people go, as we know, go above and beyond, which is great. But actually, you don't need to. That's just the person. And then you think, okay, so that's how the role is. That's how it should be done. And that's another reason why I think a lot of people face setbacks in that way with would-be employers, because they're looking at the person who sat in a role rather than the actual role, which is damaging, I think.
Yeah, especially if you then recognize that potentially from an organizational perspective, that person's been doing really what's more than one role in terms of sizing. So they've been superhuman and left because they've been burnt out. And you talked about difficult people who are set in their ways. Like, that's a prime example of a client that maybe has had that experience where they've just continued to pile something on somebody, and actually the role's massive, and the person's coped, but ultimately decided that it wasn't the place they wanted to be. And good luck hiring someone into it. Really.
Yeah, definitely. Since just quickly before we close off, since you've started in recruitment, what changes have you seen through the years in terms of how things have been done, or just the recruitment market as a whole? Have there been huge changes or minimal changes? Like, what changes in terms of approach do people have toward recruitment that you have been dealing with since you started to where you are now?
Interesting. Changes. Well, I mean, obviously there was the general market shift, which was difficult to find people. Now it's difficult to find roles. I would say that we've gone through the AI stuff in that time, and that depends who you're talking to as to the impact and, usefulness or otherwise of that. But we went through the stage where everyone said, "Oh, don't use AI to do CVs and cover letters." And again, it depends on who you're talking to. I still have people who will say to me, if I can tell something's been written by AI, then I won't read it. And I think that's, again, like I said, it depends on who's reading that CV, so you can't really interpret it. But my personal feeling on that is that if someone is capable of using tools that are available to them from an efficiency perspective, then there's nothing wrong with that. I think the problem is if they aren't using critical thinking to review that. So if I see it and it's got American spelling and it's very clear that, or you read this cover letter and then you meet the person and you meet this person and they have no communication style that even remotely resembles that. I think that's where I start to think it's a bit frustrating. But that's a big part of it now. People are using AI
to write their CVs and cover
yeah,
letters.
yeah,
Nah,
yeah.
never.
You're like, no. See,
Nope.
interesting. Yeah, it's a
Nope.
big no for you. See, it's not a big no for me. It's just a matter of, for me, it's a matter of how much they've reviewed what they've then had as a result. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I just, everyone thinks differently, but you mentioned critical thinking. And the reason why I'm not a fan of AI, writing stuff is that, yeah, you can put prompts in, but you haven't actually spent the time to think yourself to write it. You're getting the machine or whatever it is to write it with prompts. But for me, the process of thinking is part of, writing the CV and it being you in a way. How you craft up language, how you use creative writing to explain things in CVs. And yeah, I don't know. But yeah, look, I'm just not really a fan of that stuff.
There you
Like,
go.
to
Well,
write
there you
that.
go. See, and there's a prime example of depending who you've got reading that will hugely determine how far that goes. Absolutely. So that's a change for sure. We had a massive shift from the work from home model being really normalized to it's now back kind of the other way, where I get people phone and say, I'm looking for a fully remote job. And I say, well, not through us, unfortunately. We just don't see them. Yeah, we just don't see them. I'm sure there's roles out there, but it's less common. Businesses tend to want to have at least a hybrid model these days, and even that's not as common as it used to be. Don't get me started on where I sit on that, because that's a whole nother that's a whole nother point of contention. What else has changed? I think people are starting to. People use recruitment agencies more in the sense that when it was hard to find somebody, and I think people were starting to kind of think, oh, well, I've got time and I've got capacity to try and do this myself. But then we are seeing the result of that a bit as well, where they've maybe had fall-offs and things like that. So I think the mentality sort of shifts. And it's around the education piece. The more people who, as they go along, recognise the effort that goes into the process. May well, hopefully will convince them that it's worth the investment. It's not just a matter of a time thing. But certainly more recruitment agencies popping up, which is interesting. Yeah.
That will have an effect though, wouldn't it? On you, not you as in you individual, but your company. If more and more are popping up, it saturates the market, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, it is one of those industries where people quite often will have blips where, agencies will sort of pop up and not last very long, which we have seen. Or people will get into the industry. Like, I think the average time, there's kind of an anecdotal thing that if you're in recruitment longer than a year, then you're probably going to stay in it. But it's really common to fall off within the first year. I suppose it depends, their employees, if they're people that are experienced or not. And obviously, there's a lot of different industries. Like I said, there's plenty of agencies that focus on certain industries. So, yeah, it hasn't really had much of an impact for us at this point. And obviously, competition is one of those things that depending on how you're looking at it, it can be a good thing. Obviously, the more people who you see it see recruitment as a solution for their business is a good thing for us. And hopefully they're having good experiences, but equally, to be honest, if they're having bad experiences elsewhere, then that's also an opportunity. So,
yeah. I guess it depends though, isn't it? Because you mentioned earlier about there's certain recruitment agencies that are specialized in one industry. So I guess it really depends what type of recruitment. I mean, if they're just in building or, property, then it's quite different compared to a more general recruitment agency.
Yeah. It seems to be the larger centres that have the more specialised, like they might have an IT specific or which is harder to do when you're not in a large centre. I'm trying to think about other changes. The salary scale has changed. It went up quite significantly, as I said, post-COVID, and then hasn't really stayed the same. So at least again, from my kind of, that's not statistical, that's just more my impression. Yeah. There was a big shift to using a lot of video conferencing for interviewing in general. I mean, I'm not a massive advocate for that anyway, but there was a move towards that. That seems to kind of have gone along with the working from home. It's sort of gone back the other way now. People are really valuing that face-to-face human contact.
Yeah, it's super important. I spoke about 3 weeks ago to a learning and development. Well, he's a senior advisor for civil aviation. And he writes a lot of the training for like pilots, investigators, if there's like plane crashes. And we were talking about e-learning, and you would probably gather, I said to him, I'm just not really a fan. There's something different to face-to-face training rather than online. And I understand, but yeah, for me, it's the same with interviews. Like the online interviews, I can't gauge, I can't see how the person's, because I like to look at every aspect of the person, how they're sitting, how they react to questions, whether they're fumbling with their fingers, just these small things, because it gives you an understanding over what's going on in their mind when they're processing questions. But yeah, it's no, I'm more of the original, let's just sit face to face and have a conversation, really.
Yeah. Yeah. And I get that. It holds heaps of value. You're so right. Even the difference of what kind of shoes they're wearing, and it's that whole, it sounds really judgmental, but have they bothered to look at whether or not their shoes are clean?
100%. And do you know the one thing about online that, and I'm not generalizing, but a lot of the time when I've interviewed people online, I've stopped and thought to myself, and what you said about judgment, about judging someone, you could say it's judging someone to a certain extent, but I'm thinking if you're applying for a role, especially the level of the role, and you're sitting there in like a polo top or a t-shirt for an interview, I'm just like, yeah, I don't know about that. At least put a shirt on. Even if you've got track pants on underneath, we can't see. Do you know what I mean? And I'm just like thinking, is it really like that? Because you're at home, you don't really need to make an effort. But the role you're applying for is a management role.
Yes, I think it's
Not
the
having
context
that.
of
Yeah.
yeah.
Just not having that. Yeah. I'm just like,
No.
nah, not for me.
That's something that I struggle with a little bit with agency is that, like I was saying, with temporary registrations and people come in and kind of do that register interview. So it is an interview, but I do my best to be fairly approachable and not formal, because it's important that you're kind of getting the person and the real person. But then you get the opposite, where people will come in totally wearing their comfies and I can understand, because I probably framed it as like, come in and have a catch up with me. So it's finding that, even that, like, it's nuanced. It's finding the right language to portray the fact that it's an interview, but they don't need to be nervous.
What, turning up in Oodies?
Yeah. Oh, honestly,
No way. Are you
hoodies.
serious?
I don't know if I've had hoodies. We haven't got quite that far, but I've had jandals. I've had
no way.
Yeah.
No,
And it's just, and you sort of think, but then you have to check yourself and go, okay, well, have I given them the impression that this is informal? Because I'm probably deliberately being somewhat informal in my communication, still professional, but not super. The language I'm using isn't really formal interview language, deliberately, because I want them to be open and comfortable, because it is about getting to the bottom of the individual in that case. Yeah, you sort of think, I'd love you to have thought enough of it about it, thought ahead enough to think, this is my first impression.
Yeah, I think maybe I, and I've been told before, I've been quite critical, and it's hard. You try to not labor the way you think on another person, because we all do that, don't we? We think, they should have thought of this because you think of that. But for me, if I'm going to a recruitment agency, at least, again, put a shirt on, or even like a nice looking polo, if you've got that. But like open toe and stuff like that, I'm just like, give me a break. At least have some nice trainers on or something that look quite neat. Or no, I don't know. No.
Yeah,
Maybe
mind
it's
you,
my critical eye.
you're always in the tailored stuff, though. You've always got the presentation going.
I think it's upbringing, because when I was small, our mum, like, she was like, her dad was in the army, and growing up with mum, I remember every Sunday we used to have our school uniform ironed. Our shoes had to be in front of the bed, and she'll come and look and inspect. So I grew up with uniform for schools. All the schools I went to, I had to have uniform. Primary school and secondary school, blazers. Everything was inspected. So I've grown up, and I guess I just like to wear, nice, sharp looking clothes, and it's just kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I understand giving people leeway, but for some things you just think, I would have liked you to have thought a bit more about that. Like, if you're saying and it also shows how the person really wants something, doesn't it? Like, I really want this, I'm serious about this, and then they're just turning up in a t-shirt and ripped jeans, and just like, I've had that before once. It's like, nah.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because, and the other thing that's hard at the moment is that work attire has traditionally been more corporate, like jackets, suit, skirt, whatever. And we've kind of come full circle where work attire now has shifted into more stylish. So, like, the nice trainers, the nice pants that don't have to be tailored pants, and like, even, like a white t-shirt and a blazer or whatever. So finding that on that spectrum of what is the client's expectation of professional attire. Yeah, like, as you say, as a polo, some people a polo is dressed up. So it's just, that you've got to kind of always figure out who's sitting where and what everyone's perspective is, because it's not necessarily disrespect. It's
I mean, 100%. And I think and not that I think you're right. It is based on the role, because if I'm like going for a role, I don't know, like a recording studio, like I'm not really going to be like in a 3-piece, am I? It's like it doesn't fit the job because you're just wearing t-shirts or whatever. You just come in casual, but maybe the word I'm looking for is at least more presentable.
Yes, yeah,
I think that's it.
Yeah, yeah. I have heard of someone and like straight up saying to someone like, you do realize this is my first impression of you, and frankly it's quite disrespectful for you to turn up and not even have made the effort to dress.
Who is that person?
Oh, I'm coming to tell you who that person is.
I would love to interview that person. Sounds like my type of person.
And it's just like, woof, like, yeah, I mean, and this is the problem, right? I mean, there'd be so many people out there that wouldn't have an answer for that if you did that to them on the spot.
Just like see the person's reaction.
Yeah.
It's like there. Oh man. But just before, I know I've said it before, but before we finish up, what's been your proudest moment in your role so far? I know you mentioned that young girl who you worked with who was, you know, she was just great at everything. You could see she had the skills, you know, she was sharp, intelligent.
Yeah.
Was that your proudest moment, or is there something else been your proudest moment in your role?
Proud of her, that one, more than anything. Proudest moment. It's a tough one because it's not a role where you get a lot of recognition. Yeah, I mean, the training that you complete is kind of behind the scenes. A job well done is kind of like, cool, you know, enjoy. We'll keep in touch. But you know, you sometimes get nice feedback from clients, but there's not really an achievement as such. It's a day-to-day success. Honestly, probably my proudest moments would be when I've had something that hasn't gone right. And I think this is probably, again, a personality thing. When I've had a challenge in something that has gone wrong, like I've had a situation once where someone was due to start a permanent role and they had multiple things that had popped up along the way that were a bit of a red flag, but the client was particularly keen to just give them an opportunity. And I'd sort of been a bit like, you know, but cool, you know, I'm all for giving people second chances and things like that. And this person totally let me down. The night before they were due to start, they text me in the middle of the night and said, I won't be there. And I mean, hey, at least they did that much. But I never could get hold of them after that. But the thing that I'm proud of, I guess, is being able to then go and front up to that client and go, cool, this has happened. I'm the bearer of bad news, really. And although I don't have control over human behavior, effectively this is my fault because I was, you know, I undertook to do a job for somebody and I care about the result of that. So then going, okay, regardless of how uncomfortable this is, what do we do next? You know, and there's been another situation where someone else had sort of not had the skill set that they claimed to have, and it became evident once they'd started. And it wasn't without evidence because we had, you know, university stuff and everything to back it up. I'm not actually really sure quite how they didn't have what they said they had. But there are instances where things go quite badly wrong. And there's a reasonable amount of money tied up. There's a reasonable amount of energy tied up. And in this case, someone had relocated for a role and they weren't fit for the role because they'd overrepresented themselves. So it's dealing with that really hard stuff that, you know, some people may shy away from, is dealing with that and then being able to get a good result at the end, despite the fact that you've had to deal with all of that. So that's probably my proudest, thinking of those two things, my proudest moments. Having the backbone to step forward when I very easily could have been thinking, how do I get out from under this situation?
Well, I think what you mentioned also is that the biggest, I would say, implication of not dealing with that, like you're saying, is it has reputational damage, because you're coming with a reputable name, not just as a company but as an individual. And I guess if you don't, I guess, take on those challenges, then it has an impact on reputation. But yeah, I can hear how that must sound quite frustrating. And I like how you phrased it. We just don't have control over human behavior.
Yeah, no, we don't. You can do all the things, but you're never going to have 100% strike rate. That's just the reality of it.
No, definitely. Well, Charlotte, thanks so much for your time. It's been a very entertaining and enlightening conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
Good.
One thing that we always do is that we always like to ask the guests to leave us with something, whether it's a quote, whether it's words of wisdom, whether it's advice or guidance, just whatever you want to leave us with that will help us to sit and ponder and think further here. So the stage is yours.
Okay. Well, at risk of being repetitive, I think I'll circle back to what I said earlier, which is that whatever you give energy to grows. So even if it's relative to your job search and you're feeling a bit defeated about the process and there's a lot of rejections, if you sit there and you think, I'm too this, I'm not enough that, it's all well and good to say it, but you are perpetuating and growing that for yourself. Or if it's that you've had a bad day at work and you come home and you just don't have the energy for your partner or your family. And I think a lot of people who are really passionate about their jobs are guilty of that. They take it home. Just remember, I guess, that the more you sit there and think on it, if you can catch yourself and quit the loop, you'll probably feel a hell of a lot better the next day.